Well, good morning and welcome to another video, another mind training video. I have this thought in my head that I've done this before, as I think I mentioned in my last video, which is another thought in my head that I think I've done this before. It's really funny when you're basically all the mind training is doing is bringing you into the present, into this moment, which is the only moment that there actually is. Everything else being remembered or anticipated by the mind and projected out, manifesting as the form, or as the, I should say, the meaning given to form that perpetuates the false identity, perpetuates the idea that I'm a human being or a body. And whilst it's not really healthy to just simply try and transcend the whole thing by demanding that you're not a human being, that you are the spirit, it is healthy to actually look at the associations, attachments, and all that sort of stuff that we have in the world to see where it is that we are invested in false reality, invested in illusion, and fail to see things exactly as they are, or fail to see the truth of things, which is divine. And that's a transformative process, not a transcendental process. And a lot of the Eastern traditions, I was talking with Tyna the other day, and we were just mentioning Osho, who was an incredible teacher. Not one I particularly align with, but many of the more Eastern style teachers I don't particularly align with, simply because there is a lot of transcendentalism in the rhetoric and in the scriptural sort of doctrine, I suppose. But in particular, though, Osho was quite efficient when it came to encouraging people to use or to look at or to involve themselves or be honest about their associations in the world, and one of those was sex. And I don't think I mentioned it, but that's what this video is going to be about. Sex, the big one. And I say the big one because anyone who's not a virgin, pardon me, coughing at a very appropriate moment. Goodness. Anyone who's not a virgin will understand the attraction to sex. Something happening over there, seemingly happening. The idea of sex, of course, is on the form level, on the human level, on the level of illusion. It is a primitive instinct, a prime instinct, the urge to procreate. And that urge, of course, comes from an impulse. And having manifested as a male form association with the male avatar and bits and pieces appropriately, I can tell you that that urge is something that is, when you realize it, it's actually very destructive. The nature of that destruction is, and I'm finding hard to reach in and dig it out here, but the nature of that destructiveness is more in line with a person's character. It can be very overwhelming, it can be very consuming as a character defect. And I remember I once had a friend, and I don't want to sound stereotypical, but he was Italian. And his whole persona was geared around his sexuality, and anything other than that was very superficial to him. And so if you were to look at the idea of a well-rounded kind of person, his scales would be heavily tipped in one particular direction. But for every man, and I'm speaking for women too, I guess, because the urge to conceive is similarly as strong. I'm assuming, I've had women tell me all sorts of things regarding it, but if you look at the idea of that then as a, what would you call it, a biological function, it's something that can be controlled, it's something that can be brought into alignment with necessity rather than urge. But I think across the board, most people, and I say most people, including myself in in that, and my circles of friends, most people don't care to do that and are quite proud of the idea of being completely sexual about their existence, and having that as a very powerful component in their character makeup, if that makes sense. However, despite the fact that everything on the level of form is temporary and illusory and everything else, it does come to an end at a certain point. And a lot of the questions that I get from people regarding sexuality and intercourse and everything, and it does pop up quite regularly. One of the main things I get is, do we have to be celibate, or what's the deal with sex and the Course in Miracles and all that sort of thing, right? So now, before you turn me all off, I'm going to give you the distasteful, I guess, if you're still operating from a predominantly egoistic perspective in life, this is going to come across as reasonably distasteful to you and sound like religious rhetoric. But the prime function of sex is to bring forth new stock, new flesh, new bones for spirit to have its adventure and its experience in the third dimension. That's it. Jesus calls us stock. In the Course in Miracles, he said that something along the lines of the sole purpose of sex is for procreation of the stock. Now, that, when I read that, it literally stunned me that Jesus would refer to the avatar as stock. I mean, we refer to stock as like cattle. And I'm sure he would know that. I mean, even from his brief experience on earth in the time of his own ministry, as someone who would be familiar with goat herders and whatever, I'm sure that they would also be referred to as stock. So, quite a shock to the system regarding that, but at the same time, taking it up a notch on a spiritual level, it's like, okay, there's a lot going on here that I don't get just by his very use of that word. There's a lot of consideration that I put into just how valuable I see my body and what value I give it, in comparison to how the Celestials view the vessel as basically a cast-off piece of flesh suit or stock. And it really jolts you back into this kind of reality, this kind of like waking up sort of like snap to it. This is what your body is. It's, like ashes to ashes and dust to dust, and basically it's food for the worms from the time you're born to the time you die. And whilst we like to glorify it, and especially people that spend a lot of time in gymnasiums trying to perfect what they think the iconic perfect body is, You know, it's probably going to be a big slap to the ego defense to have someone who is of a non-terrestrial class, if that's the right word, a non-terrestrial peerage, refer to our bodies as stock. It's just funny. It's funny stuff. It's like, holy crap. It's like so much that I thought was important and valuable, and it's just stock. It's just tools to get the job done. That's it. That's it. It's no more. You can put lipstick on it and you can dress it up, but it's still just stock, you know. And of course, that also does away with the idea of sex for pleasure and all of that sort of stuff, because of course pleasure and pain fall into the same category under the auspices of the dualistic thought system that we tend to inherit for some strange reason still. Inherit, hopefully in 1,000 years we won't inherit it. We'll inherit a singular thought system and collapse the time of our need to dwell in this third dimensional shithole. And if you don't think it's a shithole, I'm sorry, but try sitting in an old people's home with someone you love with dementia and tell me you don't think it's a shithole then. But it's really a personal journey, you know. That's what I love about transformation, about purification. It's a personal journey, and whilst I can give you my viewpoint and my impressions and my perspective on the process of transformation, I don't expect by any means for anyone out there to say, yep, that's exactly how it is for me, Dave. You know, I know a few of you that write to me and tell me things. It's like, you guys are right up there alongside me, contemporary with where I'm at, and I'm very pleased about that. I haven't yet met anyone who's of a helpful nature offered me anything greater than I'm able to comprehend. And to that end, with all of my efforts and meditation and everything that I've read and looked at, I very much feel like I'm at the end of my learning process, and that there's very little more to learn, although I've been proven wrong wrong about that many times. Currently I'm sitting with the idea of compassion and tolerance, and that's relative to looking after my father now, who does have dementia. And it's very, very difficult, and I'm finding that I'm having to be very miracle-minded with myself in that regard, and quite often in retrospect, unfortunately. So I'm allowing that to brew. I'm allowing my shortcomings to brew in me. I'm aware of them in that regard of losing patience and things like that. In a controlled way, however, but I'm aware that in that particular regard that there must be a better way to deal with my relationship with my father as he loses his marbles. And it's really one moment at a time. It really is. But it's definitely something that's pushing the compassion button, that's for sure, and the patience and tolerance buttons. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful. I know there's a lesson here and a greater, deeper learning for me here. And I feel that there's an element of grace that can enter into this relationship. But like I said, I'm just sitting with it and allowing it to brew until I feel that honesty for prayer. And I don't feel it just yet. I'm very much aware that I'm perhaps trying to avoid prayer, or perhaps trying to not be honest. So letting it brew, letting it push my buttons a little more, will probably push me into that place where, all right, it's time to take action. I need to pray. I need to mean it. I need to be full integrity here and But at the moment, it feels like I'm still sort of circling around, and the greater portion of the lesson has yet to present itself. So that's just how it feels. I'm prepared to be wrong about everything, but anyway, I think being aware of it is, being aware of your shortcomings is the first step to, definitely the first step to miracle-mindedness regarding them. So, but back to sex. There's all sorts of sexual practices in the spiritual realm. There's tantric sex, where you bring each other to that sort of ecstatic climax without touching and through breath and all that sort of thing. And that's got nothing to do with transformation, really, because everything is an idea in the mind about it. Just as with dementia, everything is an idea about it in my own mind that I'm attempting to expose for the purpose of healing. So if I were to look at Jesus's proclamation that the only use of sex is for the procreation of the stock, and I mean, I'm not going to double check Jesus. I'm not going to fact check him. You know what I mean? That's like, this is the head of the atonement we're talking about. This is the guy that resurrected. Like, it doesn't matter what Osho says, it doesn't matter what Krishnamurti says, it doesn't matter what anybody on earth says. It doesn't matter who channels what from what other divine entities. You know, we're talking about Jesus, the head of the atonement. So when he says that, for the procreation of the stock, that's the only use of it, I'm instantly aware that I have other uses for it. I mean, not me personally. I seem to have trans, whatever it is, not trans in LGBTQ, but trans in transformed that urge. It's been, what's it been? And I'm not calling myself celibate or anything. I'm not. I mean, if the opportunity comes up, I'll say yes to it and see where the truth of my declaration is in that. But it's been 4 years, maybe nearly 5. And I don't miss it, and I don't long for it, and I don't have any kind of desire, yearning, or want. I still have the physical capacity for it. And there's interesting asides with regards to that as well, especially on the male side of the spectrum. I remember reading a book called The Unknown Man, which I think is still available probably through eBay as a second-hand. Now, The Unknown Man, and there was a picture of an eyeball on the cover, and another book by, I think it was by Dar John, Avatar Dar John, Adidar Samaranch. He's had lots of names over the years, and now he just calls himself, or he did call himself, Dar, or Dear John. I feel like I'm missing out, like I should change my name at least once in this incarnation to be something spiritual other than Dave. Dar Dave, there you go. Dar Dave. It was one of his books, I think, anyway, but there was talk about the enlightened mind. Now, I want to just point something else out when I go to this. The enlightened mind, the mind that has had direct union with God, not the mind that has had revelations or multiple revelations, because it is possible to have multiple revelations. I've had a few revelations, and what I would call revelations of a divine order outside of the physical body. Right, but the big one, enlightenment, right, or illumination of the mind, salvation, the acceptance of salvation, atonement, at-one-ment, the icing on the cake. It's very rare. It's a very rare occurrence. Jesus talks about it in the Courses, very rare, and he even says it's so rare that if it happens, so be it, and if it doesn't happen, so be it as well. But Dar John, of course, being an illuminate mind, and myself, which is, even when I say the words, about that regarding myself, I still find it, you know, like I'm talking about the false self, obviously, but the illusory self, but I still find it difficult to, not difficult, maybe, but it still seems a little distant in my acceptance of it, in my comprehension of it. And I guess that's because I'm a top-down person. I haven't had years of preparation or a lifetime of preparation, perhaps, prior to the experience. It happened to me first without any kind of inclination it was going to happen. I mean, I've always been kind of stupid, so you would think hearing a voice from the sky would give you some kind of inclination. But anyway, one of the things, and I think it was Dar John's book, that the semen issue, or a man's semen changes as, obviously everything changes. Your mind, as your mind changes, your body changes to suit your holy purpose, to suit your divine purpose. You automatically begin to heal from your false perspectives, and therefore the body, being a production of the mind or a product of the mind, begins to heal, let's say, automatically in sympathy with that, and as with my healing from cancer, right? So, and all sorts of other things heal, and things sometimes that you're not even aware of, genetic disorders and things like that. But one of the ones that's interesting regarding to sex, since this video is about sex, is that for the enlightened mind carries the ultimate genetic code. This is from memory, so I'm probably doing a very bad job in memory. Carries the ultimate genetic code for the most purified version of the form, if that makes sense. So, and I don't know where to go with that. I mean, like, it's kind of a parody. It's a catch-22. You have this kind of like thoroughbred semen racing through your body, or sitting there in your reserve, and at the same time you have no use for it. Like, there's no purpose for it. I mean, there's not like people queuing up saying, hey, sexy man, you know, how about buying me a drink? There's none of that, and there's no desire or need or want for that. So there's this kind of paradoxical or ironic element as far as that goes. I don't know that I have any more to say about that. It was just something in passing that sort of I remembered. Oh, I remember my teacher Ted made mention of it also in a session one day. He said he had to have, as part of, I think it was part of his visa requirement, because he was of a certain age, that he had to have a full physical. I don't know that he had, I can't remember how it came about, but he mentioned that he just mentioned in passing to a few of us one day in a session that his sperm had 2 tails, and he laughed about that. So I have a feeling he was joking, but he was referencing the prime code possible, the highest codex possible for chromosomal transfer, I guess, within the species. I don't know how to describe it or talk about it. I'm not very educated as far as intercourse goes on a scientific level, but I remember thinking it was in line at the time. What he was talking about was in line with what I'd read, and I'm pretty sure it was Dar John's work now. I'm pretty sure it was something I read in one of his books. Anyway, hello, we've got some hares down in the field. Way down. I'm not used to seeing rabbits and hares and things. I come from a much warmer climate, and whilst we did have them up there, they're much more occurring here. So, anyway, sex. So the idea of sex, it's an energy. Let's look at it as an energy. And we'll look at it as an urge. Right? So if you're, let's say you're 35 and you've got 3 kids, you don't intend on having any more, but you still have this urge. Right? So in the Course in Miracles, Jesus refers to the unrequired sexual urge as simply a misidentification. Right? Now, the miracle impulse is what we're looking at. Right? On a transformative level and on a transformative association, or through the transformative association, we're reinterpreting everything on a human level to a spiritual level. We're reinterpreting our urges to impulses. Right? Now, the body and the association of the mind-body association is constantly, not that you'll ever see this perhaps, but you might have a sudden shift into invisibility, but the body is constantly phasing in and out of existence. Right? And if you want to call that flashing in, flashing out, faster than the speed of thought. Right? It's faster than the speed of thought because the body is made by thought, which is a slowing down of the vibration. It's a dumbing down or a densing down of the vibration of thought. The only thing of that which is faster is creation being everywhere all at once. It's a omnipresent. I don't even know if you could call it a speed, but it's an omnipresent happening, occurrence, isness. Isness is nice, isn't it? That's a good word. It's an omnipresent isness. So what's happening is you're receiving an impulse to create. And in the world, you're constantly miscreating with it. You're using it to miscreate or to produce or make the form, project the form, rather than to create as creation is, as the extension of God's light in its pure and unadulterated or unmiscreated expression. So when you make the decision, it's like, all right, I've seen that I've been here for 50 incarnations. I see what the world's about. I just die at the end and can't take anything with me. What's the point? And you begin your journey, and along the way you start to have indicators. You start to become witness to the idea that your journey is a true one. If you're using the workbook lessons of A Course in Miracles, you're going to see how much integrity you have with that, or your lack of integrity with it. It's kind of important in a sense. And I had my friend James, brother James, wrote to me just recently, just this week actually, saying he'd seen his lack of integrity with the lessons and became somewhat despondent about it. And I said to him, that's actually a good thing. It's good that you can see that, and because now you can change. Right? Now you can ask for help. You can ask in prayer for help to give the lessons and your efforts with the lessons the integrity that they need to bring about a positive result. And hopefully that's the way he's looking at it too. But you begin to notice things changing. You begin to realize the efficacy and the truth of your spiritual transformation, and it kind of comes as a shock as well. You start to think to yourself, holy crap, this is a real thing I'm doing here. And all of those witnesses build up. Now, usually most people don't want to look at sex straight away. They like the pleasurable parts of the world and detest the painful and horrific parts of the world. And most people's transformative process usually begins with the horrific parts and the parts they don't like, the trauma and the past and all of that sort of stuff. And as you go and start to clean those up through healing, then what tends to be left is sort of more of the pleasurable stuff. And so you start to look at what you like the least out of your pleasurable stuff, and your list of pleasurable stuff gets smaller and smaller and smaller until finally you're left with sex. And if somebody's got something better than sex, actually I went skydiving once and I thought that was better than sex. Just the adrenaline rush predominantly. But you're left with sex. Now, if you could look at that as being a massive amount of energy, or a massive corruption to the miracle impulse, or a massive distortion of the miracle impulse, you could deal with it straight away. I can sit here and tell you that there will be no loss to you in giving up the idea of intercourse and the pleasure of the body and all of that sort of stuff. And indeed, that's obstacle number 2, which is the belief that the body's valuable for what it can offer. And I can tell you that till I'm blue in the face. But I know for a fact that my own marriage of 15 years fell apart because my wife declared to me that she still wanted sex. And I realised within myself that I'd crossed that threshold where I didn't want sex. And whilst we had a very open kind of relationship where I wouldn't have held a grievance or wouldn't have judged her at all for outsourcing that particular need, she chose to cut the ribbon and go her own way, which I respect. That's her choice. But if you can look at it from the point of view that you've got nothing to lose, actually. You don't know when your time is up. You don't know what's around the corner. You're being told that salvation is being offered and that you're going to have to give up the world in its entirety anyway. So there comes this point, or there did for me, there comes this point where you make a commitment to that, no matter what it looks like. It's like, I make a commitment to that no matter what it looks like. And I was looking at that, actually, that very same idea of that commitment no matter what it looks like, with regards to Elon Musk and his ideas to send that 19-year-old girl to Mars. I think next year, I think she's going, if they're still going ahead with that. But it's a one-way trip. So basically the girl's committing suicide in the name of science, going to Mars to set up something that will be the foundations of further trips to Mars, you know. And her commitment, no matter what it looks like, is accepting that she won't be coming back. Now, she's a 19-year-old girl. I don't want to project anything here, but I would probably assume still a virgin, or someone who's not had the pleasures of the flesh, because for most people that would be unbearable. But I can imagine that for someone who hasn't succumbed, let's say, as a word, I don't know if succumbed is the right word, but for someone who hasn't tasted the pleasure of the flesh, that would be a much more difficult decision. That's a better way to put it, a much more difficult decision to make, especially with the idea of then having a family, children and everything else. So it's a huge commitment, it's massive, and it's a commitment with no reward other than a selfless act, or what's to be seen as a selfless act for humanity. And if you have the shtum, if you have the integrity, or if you have the character to be able to appreciate giving your life, perhaps not as a martyr, I don't think martyr's the right way to look at it, but as someone who gives your life for the greater good, you know, then, man, you know, I don't even know where to go with that. It's just like, that's beyond. That's up there with the saints, you know. I know for all of us that are doing our transformation, we're going to have these periods, and I say we because I still actually, I don't know that I do still have periods of doubt and pain and regret or anything. Oh, maybe, yeah, I do. They don't seem to have much power over me these days, eh? It's very easy to let things go. But that idea of making a total commitment to one's transformation, a total commitment to giving up or to surrendering to divine source, divine purpose in its totality. It's like Jesus says in the Course in Miracles, most of us have a slowly evolving training program. And I remember Ted, my teacher, said to us one day in session, there would have been 100 people in the room, and he said, look around and look at everybody here in this room. He said, you guys, even if you haven't yet picked up the book to read it, but you've just got the book in your hands, he said, you guys are very late timers, early in time. right? Think about that, late timers, early in time. Like if you're looking at your spiritual journey in even a half serious way, and even just, you know, without really knowing what it's about, but still being willing, there's something inside of you calling you to it, you know, which is how it happens. And I remember in the early days I had many bouts of why me, Lord? Why me? Why call on me, you know? But now, of course, I'm very, very glad. There's no sense of loss whatsoever in giving up the world, because you're giving up something that actually doesn't exist, giving up a dream or an illusion. And having had an experience of reality, I remember since that day making that decision, that's all I want, and the world can't tempt me for anything else to want anything else. And it's like I have had temptations in the world, don't get me wrong, I've had plenty of temptations in the world since then and succumbed to them, but knowingly and with the purpose of being more honest about where I find myself with whatever it was that was being presented as an idea of temptation. And through that process, then finding the same equality or the same equilibrium with that honesty in prayer, right? For the healing of whatever it was, my attraction or my desire or my want for whatever. And sex is the same. So it's very personal. It's a very personal journey. The point you get to with anything, when you're looking at healing anything in your own mind, whether it seems to be I need to heal my ideas about my physical disease, or whether I need to heal my ideas about my relationship with somebody else, or my grievances or whatever, or heal my ideas about sex, you're looking at facets of the one relationship that you have with God, right? So, but it shows up in many ways. It's like it's either serve the world or serve God. And that's what you're always looking at. I'm looking at my relationship with my Father, my Heavenly Father, or my earthly domain. And the earthly domain, no matter how good it looks, it's always symbolic, no exceptions, of a belief in separation. When that belief in separation is no longer valued, as Jesus says in the Course, the world will disappear before your eyes to be not seen again, you know. And I find myself as a top downer going through the process of my purification, headed towards that point, hopefully. Yeah. So it is very personal. It is very personal. If you're out there and you enjoy a good fuck, then get into it. Enjoy the hell out of it, you know, like give it all you got, and keep reading your course, and then eventually what's going to happen is it'll bring up guilt. It'll bring up guilt. Eventually, through being witness to everything else going on in your life transformatively, you'll realize that you're using the pleasure of the body against God, which is actually the denial of love and not love at all. And it's going to bring up guilt, and that guilt will then give you the equality and honesty for prayer, for the healing of it. And until then, carry on, you know. It's like Carry On Up the Nile, or whatever that movie was, those British carry-on films. They're all very bawdy and adventurous sexually. Don't tell Jesus I told you that, though, if you meet him. I'm only giving you this from my own perspective. If you've got the honesty right now to give up the entire world, then God bless you, you know. I had the honesty for it in a rare moment in 1997 where I just couldn't go on, and I wanted to serve, and here I am serving, I guess, but I wanted to serve humanity. I wanted to make a change because there was something crying out to me that was wrong about the world and wrong in the world. And you know, it's like, anyway, boom shanker, enlightenment, and then purification to ground that experience of enlightenment, which I feel like I'm grounding now it's kind of tough, as I mentioned before, accepting that I'm a very rare circumstance in the world. There was a point in my very early years of transformation where I thought everybody was enlightened and I was the last one. That's how it appeared to me. It's like everybody knew this and I'm the class dunce. That was it. And now I'm realizing that, and I know that smacks of the idea of separation of a me and others and whatever, but you have to include that in where you find it. You have to include the world in as you find it. And that's how I find it, even though I know, right, okay, and so to perceive something or to find something a certain way and to know something as your knowledge is two different things, right? I know that it's not true. I know that we're all actually awake because God only creates mind awake, but yet I still find myself seemingly circumscribed by this particular episode of time and space where I seem to be very early in time, like my teacher said. It's only 2,000 years since the resurrection, and I'm quite a rare species. So I'm up there with the white buffalo and the white rhino. Actually, I think the white rhinoceros has now just become extinct. So there you go. But, and there are many people who will tell you that they are enlightened, especially on the Course in Miracles world stage, even of my own namesake, and I know that that's false, that claim of his, so do with that as you will. But I have met, and this is interesting to talk about too, because everything I can talk about, I'm starting to realize is something that is at some point going to be valuable to somebody. So there's a video I did just recently, light activation, light communication, whatever I called it. There are brothers that I know. There's one or two or three maybe in Australia, or four or five, a handful anyway in Australia, who have had revelation to such a degree that when we are in proximity with each other in form, we just automatically join in that light activation, and it's like it doesn't even, there's no need to talk about it or anything, it just happens. That's because that other mind is illuminated minds join in the illuminated spectrum. I know other minds that have been doing the course for some time and have had experiences that can be prompted. And this is the only way I can talk about it. I don't know how it works because I'm talking about something on a higher level, but it appears that they can be prompted. And I've seen my teacher Ted, what I would say is him prompting or transferring light or activating light in someone else. They can be prompted to sort of like tip the scales, if you like, just by being in proximity. And then of course there's other people that have no clue whatsoever. So everybody's at where they're at, but we're all on the same journey, we're all on the same path. But it's just interesting. It's just very interesting. Just to stretch my legs, the idea of maturity, or the idea of progress then in spiritual transformation, one of the things Jesus says in the Course is you will know others who are like you in the world. And yesterday I was down at the Gold Coast walking around in this massive shopping complex, and I found myself feeling quite disoriented. I'd been there for a long time ago, but the place, they're always adding to it, you know, and this place I was kind of lost. And I had the thought to myself, it would be so nice just to meet somebody like me in this, you know, and Jesus says that you will know. And he even goes as far as to say their foreheads are calm and untroubled and their eyes are serene and all of that sort of thing. And I stood there. I stood there and opened my mind in the shopping complex, in one of the walkways, an upstairs walkway, and I had people going around me, of course, and everything like that, and I stood there for a few minutes, and but nobody came to mind, nobody came up. I wasn't directed to anybody. It was just sort of like this kind of a void, a very superficial void it felt. So I just included that in as my experience in oneness on earth and in that moment, and let go of the way that I was feeling about it. But it's just funny that there was that prompt to try and be with a like-minded, or you know, birds of a feather flock together. Your vibe attracts your tribe, all of that sort of thing. And being a late timer, early in time, I find myself very much alone in that sense, not feeling lonely, but alone in that way. And I hope that makes sense. I don't feel lonely at all. I could sit by myself on a mountaintop for 50 years and wouldn't feel lonely. Anyway, I've gotten off the track of sex again, but I think I've covered everything. I mean, just be honest, you know, look at it. Is sex something really that you want to look at as far as transforming that to giving up? I mean, I met a Hare Krishna chap once, a devotee of Krishna, who was still a virgin, had no desire for sex or whatever, and his idea was that he was serving Krishna through his chastity and serving his brotherhood in the Hare Krishna community. And that's all well and good. I can't judge him for that, but looking at it from my own perspective, I couldn't help but wonder if there was some kind of element of denial involved in it. Like, you know, you don't know what the forbidden fruit tastes like until you bite it. You know, the old Adam and Eve analogy. And then does that then trigger awareness of a deeper sense of association on the physical form that you might be avoiding or you know, otherwise. So anyway, hopefully letting all my judgments about that be for the greater good, and before, like, judgment isn't something you can drop, you have to transform it so that the purpose of judgment serves the higher purpose, serves the higher good, and it says that in the Course. Anyway, I'm being summoned. I shall see you in the next one. Peace.